Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Tuesday's edition. We're traveling today, so it's audio only, folks. So you'll get my mug in front of you, but we're happy to do the show today as we travel from west to east. Thursday, we will be in Delray Beach, and Jeffrey and I will be joining you live on Thursday. So let's get to the news of the past couple days. There's a lot to dissect here. First, we'll start with Joe Biden announcing that he is going to officially run for re-election, effectively freezing out the rest of the Democratic field. Why is this newsworthy? Well, anytime a sitting president decides he's going to run again, it's newsworthy. But here's the facts let's not let these facts get in the way of a good story here. 75% of all voters, not just Republicans, all voters, do not want him to run. And it's really obvious why. We have a situation where the man's going to be 82 years old. If he were to win again, he's 80 right now. So overwhelmingly, despite these numbers, and despite his age, and the fact that 75% of voters do not want him to run, I'm going to give you a shocker here, folks. He is still favored to win. And I'll explain that as we go along. But think about those numbers I just described to you. We have all kinds of international problems in this country. We have inflation, albeit coming down, is still a problem. Crime's out of control in all of our deep blue major cities. We have a problem at the border that's ongoing, has been under the Biden administration. It's debacle after debacle. He makes these stupid inferences statements when he's around people, half of which he doesn't even recognize, unfortunately. And the vast majority, 3/4 of the American public doesn't want him to run. So you have to ask yourself the question, Mark, why is he running if 75% of Americans do not want him to run? And I think the answers are going to be pretty straightforward as we go through this. 51% of Democrats, folks, that's his own party, do not want him to run. 26%, about a quarter, do want him to run. So you're sitting there saying, Mark, what is up? Only a quarter of Democrats want him to run. Half his party doesn't want him to run. 3/4 of the American people don't want him to run. The cognitive failures are obvious. And you're saying with all the problems this country has, I didn't even mention the debt ceiling, and that's coming up too. With all the issues we have, Biden has drawn one opponent, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Kennedy's getting about 10% of the vote. In addition to the statistics I just quoted, the Wall Street Journal did an editorial, and in the editorial, they specifically said the president is in decline. We agree. Look, folks, hopefully we're all going to be lucky enough to get to Biden's age. That's sort of the norm now in this country, for men, women a little bit longer. And we wish the president nothing but good health. But the fact is, the country needs something other than an octogenarian to be leading this country. If the president had his full facilities, we might not be talking about this. But to anyone with half a brain who sees him on the very limited basis that the White House staff allows him to get in front of the public, folks, this is an easy call. Now, as we go through this, you're going to realize here's why he's going to run. Right now, while 75% of voters do not want him to run, 70% of voters do not want Trump to run either. But Trump's already in the race. Biden's in the race. And of those 70% of voters that do not want Trump to run, 44% of them are Republicans. And here's the killer, folks. Look, we know 93% of Democrats don't want him to run. But this, and I've talked about this ad nauseum, for all of you Schaftlein Report veterans out there, this is the key thing he's going to have to overcome. 70% of independent voters do not want Trump to run. Now, that statistic right there tells you, the Democratic Party sees a Republican Party disorganized, following Trump, and they figure, look, we already beat Trump once. We'll beat him again. They're probably right. That's the sickening thing about this. I hate even telling you that because I know most of you are conservatives. But look, let's go through and analyze this. Ron DeSantis is going on an overseas trip. He's going to Israel, Great Britain, the UK, Japan, South Korea. He's going to be meeting with business and political leaders. Okay, nothing wrong with it. That's good if you're getting ready to enter a presidential race. You want to be seen as someone who has the stature to do that. No problem there. The issues right now are, in the latest poll, this is an NBC poll, Trump led DeSantis 46-31. That's 15 points. 15 points, that can be made up easily. The problem is that's the best rating he's had. Most polls show Trump up 25-30 on DeSantis. And the issue is this, folks. DeSantis, and he's my governor, he's a great governor, just won re-election by 19 points. Solid backing in the state of Florida. Managed to do great things there. But the issue is this. These elections are state-by-state elections for president in primary and general election. In the Republican primary, it starts in Iowa, goes to New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Super Tuesday. Trump's base of conservative, working-class Americans is rock solid. DeSantis, at this point, has made very little dent in it. Yes, we have other candidates running. The businessman is running. I don't want to butcher his name. He's a really good guy. I don't have his name. I can't butcher it. Nikki Haley is still running. We'll get into her. She's going to be a topic later in the show. But Mike Pence, he's going to wait until June. Mike Pompeo said no. Sununu of New Hampshire's thinking about it. We'll talk a little bit about him. Glenn Youngkin's thinking about it. But Trump has that base, that hardcore base, and you're not going to chip into that, folks. Those people are loyal to Trump, and that's just the way it is. So we get back to the overwhelming question. Why is Biden running again? Well, think about how the Democrats treat elections, folks. Everybody knew John Fetterman had a problem, and yet Democrats backed him tooth and nail in Pennsylvania, knew he had major flaws, health flaws because of his stroke. They didn't care. They thought he had enough name recognition, and Republicans had a candidate they thought they could beat in Dr. Oz, and they did. Maybe we didn't nominate the best candidate. We could have had David McCormick, but at the end of the day, the Democrats didn't care that Fetterman was a liability. They got him across the finish line. That's all they cared about. The same thing will happen with Joe Biden. Folks, in the Democratic mindset, they view Donald Trump as the Antichrist. They literally do. They view him as the Antichrist. So for them, there's an old political saying, if you stuck a yellow, I think this came out of Texas, if you stuck a yellow dog on the ballot and put a D next to his name, certain percentage of the public is going to vote for it because it's got a D next to its name. And then you add in some of these politically sensitive issues, shall we say, such that, Republicans are perceived as the party who took away abortion rights, even though, it's not true, but that's the perception. Okay. And then you've got a lot of young people. They don't necessarily agree with some of these policies. You talk about major issues, like we talked about earlier, the border, the economy, inflation, running up against a debt ceiling. But a lot of people, folks, are single issue voters. The teachers union, you think they're going to vote for Republicans? No, they're solidly in the Democrats. I could go on and on. the identity politics behind all these things, it makes it very challenging. And again, to win presidential elections, we can sit here right now, folks, way out till the election, and we can call with impunity, without even worrying about it, 42 states in which way they're going to vote. This election in 2024 ultimately is going to come down to 8 states. And the Biden White House is handicapping this race like you and I are. They're saying, hey, we're going to run against Trump, which is the likely scenario. We beat him last time. We'll beat him again. That's why he's running. And you know what Democrats will do? You know, if he's elected and he starts to decline, well, if Kamala Harris is going to run as vice president, they'll simply elevate her to the job. I mean, they literally don't care. That's why it's somewhat selfish that Biden's doing what he's doing. But politically speaking, you can't criticize the man. I mean, he beat Trump last time. Now, John Sununu, who I mentioned earlier, governor of New Hampshire, he's already called Trump a 3-time loser, and there is some truth to that. You know, we lost the 2018 midterms, got beat pretty bad. We lost the 2020 presidential election, and in 2022, we underperformed in the House and didn't gain the Senate. And a lot of Trump candidates got beat. So he's already a 3-time loser, according to Sununu. And Sununu says if he's the nominee, he's going to be a 4-time loser. You know, and Sununu's point was, we talk about debt. Trump added $8 trillion to the debt when he was president, albeit the last part of his presidency was COVID related. You can't hold that against him. But even if you didn't have that, it was still a $6 trillion add to the deficit. So, folks, we've got a lot of issues to come up with here. But in plain speaking English, which is what we do here, and we cut through the BS. If you're sitting here, Joe Biden in that White House, and you handicap, just like we're going to handicap the Kentucky Derby coming up pretty soon, he is analyzing this saying, I'm running against Trump. I beat him before. I may not be popular with the American public, but Trump is less popular. And I've got some issues on my side in certain voting blocks that they can't overcome. And when you build a coalition like they did before of teachers union, you know, more than 50% of women voted for Democrats, and that number's not going down, folks, because one thing about it, when you take away someone's right, again, I'm not talking about the moral or the ethical issues. I'm just saying you take away somebody's right that had something, and now you're fighting against these abortion pills. And yeah, folks, I'm telling you, and the late Rush Limbaugh and I are on opposite sides of this one. You know, he said we need to champion these issues, and people are starting to come to the realization, hey, no, this is a losing issue for Republicans. When you talk about telling a woman her reproductive rights and you're trying to codify it into law, which again, the Supreme Court didn't do that, they just returned it to the states. But you have situations like that, and you're not going to win elections. And then you add in the fact that Biden administration has been incredibly supportive of the African-American community. They already received 92% of the votes the last election. I see zero indications that's going to change. And then you group it together with, you know, the environmentalists, climate wackos, teachers unions, you know, clearly the Biden administration has a strong support for that tiny fraction of people call themselves transgenders. But in the big political picture, a lot of liberals are saying, hey, look, we're a big inclusive tent. Republicans are mean, nasty, blah, blah, blah. You know the story. So these are things we're going to have to deal with. But that's why he's running. I mean, I'm summarizing it in a nutshell, putting it crystal clear. But that's why he's running. Now, we'll tie that bow together at the end. Let me get to a couple issues that we're going to talk a little about here. Jim Justice, the governor of West Virginia, very popular guy, is going to oppose Joe Manchin in his Senate race. Well, guess what? When Joe Manchin, who's been on a lot of Sunday talk shows, he looks around the environment, he's a centrist. He is a centrist Democrat. You know, he's criticized Biden for a lot of his actions, most notably his inaction on the debt ceiling. Joe Manchin is considering running for president under the No Labels Party as an independent. Well, guess what? He could do pretty well. Can he win? I don't know. But he's not ruling it out. This man's no more a Democrat than than I am. I mean, his conscience is Republican or centrist. The Democratic Party's far to the left. So the party's left Manchin. I don't know why he doesn't just switch and become a Republican, but he says he's more independent. Anyhow, so he's going to have opposition. He may end up running for president on the independent ticket. That will help take some votes away from Biden if he does that. All right, debt ceiling. We're on a collision course here, folks. I've said this. I've talked I'm blue in the face. Biden is showing no movement on this debt ceiling. McCarthy put out a credible plan to raise the debt ceiling $1.5 trillion, and we'd save $4.5 trillion over a course of many years, going back to 2022 budget levels and capping the increases at 1% a year. Do you know any Democrat that would vote for something capping spending at 1% a year? I don't. But you know what? Joe Manchin came out and supported the plan and said Biden needs to get to the table, as have many other Democrats. They're not the only ones. But the hard-headed, hardcore Democratic leadership, Schumer said that bill will never see the Senate. Biden is not even negotiating with Kevin McCarthy. And here's what's going to happen. We're going to come right down to the wire. We will default. It'll be on a weekend. They'll get everybody together. The stock market will go down 10%. People will be freaking out. Democrats will blame Republicans when Biden didn't come to the table. Think about this. We had the disaster in Afghanistan. I've mentioned all kinds of problems that this country has, and now Biden's going to have another one. Why? Because these hardcore Democrats won't engage. And there's the difference this time. You got a lot of Republicans in that House that are saying, to hell with you. If you don't engage, we'll force you to engage. And you know what, folks? Americans their savings. Oh boy, they are reducing savings because they have to. They're doing everything they can to keep up with this inflation bugaboo. Now, inflation's come down, but it's still running 5%. It's still too high. And we talked earlier, about some of these social issues. Let me give you put real life. Bud Light ran that disastrous transgender ad. Folks, transgenders represent a tiny, tiny fraction of the American public. It's like 1/4, 1%. If that. And yet, what does Bud Light do? They put some transgender social media follower, on an ad in America. Boy, that did not go over real well. Sales are down 17% as a result of that trans advertising campaign. 2 executives got put on leave. Look, folks, I'm not telling companies how to advertise. I mean, but you got to use some common sense. And again, we talked about Biden disasters, Afghanistan. There's another one. I mean, this hasn't been getting a lot of media, but word leaked out that the Biden administration, was trying to convince the Ukrainians, Kiev, not to attack Moscow. So let me get this straight here. The Russians can launch all kinds of missiles into Ukraine. Ukraine can defend itself, and they fought brilliantly, but they can't attack the Russians, and the Biden administration doesn't want the war to escalate. The Russians don't think like that. I guarantee you, if Trump was president, this would not be happening, because they didn't do that stuff when he was president. When Ronald Reagan was president, similar situation, because they knew there were repercussions. Same thing with the Bushes. But you get someone like Biden in there, who the Russians could see right through this. I don't know. Kiev, they did not, they didn't attack Moscow. And we don't know what would have happened if they did. But given the Biden administration has a history of getting virtually everything wrong internationally, we had a great relation with the Saudis, not anymore. Now the Saudis are, chumming up the Chinese now. Trump had a great relationship with the Saudis. But here again, internationally, telling a country what they can't do, and then when they're in the middle of a war with the Russians, I don't get it. The stated purpose, they attack Moscow, then they might use tactical nuclear weapons. The Russians are going to do what the Russians have to do. They don't care about their servicemen. They've had 200,000 people killed. They don't care. The Russians do not care, folks. Now, speaking of Biden, two people are coming under a lot of fire. Treasury Secretary Tony Blinken, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Yes, why, Mark? Well, they're under fire for their roles in the Hunter Biden laptop fiasco when these two esteemed diplomats both spread lies and disinformation, which has now been discredited by CIA operative Mike Morrell. You know, they pitched that story about Russian disinformation, and oh yeah, the Russians are involved in it. It's not it was all a lie. And yet, here again, folks, was it successful? Yeah. Biden got elected president. Did they suppress information? Yeah, they did. What could it have changed votes? Yes, it could have. But they're, again, what do I say about these Democrats? They don't care. They invented stories about the Russians. Why? To discredit Trump. Keep that in mind, folks. Always keep that in mind. And then, you know, back on these social things here. You know, we talk about crime in the cities. I think Bill Maher had it right the other day when he, on his show, he came out, was talking about Chicago. He said, young black men are killing each other, which is what's happening predominantly. He said, where are all the celebrities coming out against this? You don't see them. You know, every time you have a situation where, unfortunately, a young African-American man is killed by a white person, you know, makes headlines, you know, people get invited to the White House, blah, blah, blah. Never happens the other way. As long as the social agenda of the Biden administration is being followed, they're going to champion stuff like this. It's a sad commentary where we are as a country, but, you know, again, the Biden administration, they've got an approval rating among African-American voters, 92, 93%. One thing that Democrats in the White House are very good at is identity politics. And folks, Republicans better learn that lesson. All right, I'm going to close it out with a couple commentaries. You know, we had a couple high-profile anchors that were relieved of their jobs. Tucker Carlson at Fox News, Don Lemon at CNN. Don Lemon should have been fired a long time ago. He's a complete incompetent, radical leftist, and yet CNN kept him on until the execs there finally said enough is enough. Here's a guy who, again, the hypocrisy of it all. A guy who supports Joe Biden, who's 80, and Nikki Haley, who's in her early 50s, says, oh, she's over the hill. Can't past her time. I mean, that led to media reports saying, was that the final straw that broke the camel's back, or was it the interview with the Republican businessman who's running for president? I don't know, but thank God he's gone. They fired him. Long overdue. The Tucker Carlson thing is a lot more complicated. You know, we don't know the ins and outs on it, but according to, again, certain leaks coming out, his firing came from Rupert Murdoch, the chairman of the board, CEO. You know, he's the head honcho. His sons run the company, and allegedly, the person that fired him was the CEO of Fox News, who reports to Murdoch's two kids, and ultimately, it was Murdoch apparently that made the decision. We'll see how that plays itself out. A lot of conservatives are not happy about this. They'd already perceived that Fox News was getting away from its conservative roots. And again, I'm not telling people what to do. We were big fans of Carlson here at Schaftlein Report. We thought he did a damn good job. Now, there's things that have come out relative to that Dominion case. We're not going to comment on that. We don't have the right to comment on that, but we'll just leave it alone. But we, on a personal basis, we did like Carlson. We supported the vast majority of his views. Not all, but the vast majority. So again, the changing, media network. NBC fired their president recently. So, folks, a lot of things conservatives have been up in arms about over the past few years. There have been changes made. Some, it's like a battle. You win some, gain some ground, lose some ground. But big changes in the political atmosphere. So look, traveling today, we will be back on Thursday. Special treat for you. Jeffrey and I will be in studio together. I look forward to seeing you then. And folks, again, thanks for listening today. You couldn't necessarily viewing, but thank you for being a great audience. And I will plan on seeing you on Thursday. Have a great day. Next couple of days. See you then.